Welcome back to Swiping Through History. Again, we're here for episode 3, the Battle of Ludford Bridge, or otherwise known as the non-Battle of Ludford Bridge. Thank you for being here with us today, Mike.
Thank you for inviting me. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, fantastic. No, the pleasure and the honor is all ours. So we're talking about episode 3 that we've just released about Ludford Bridge. Obviously, it's quite an interesting one. We use the angle of chess to kind of try and create a sense of what was really going on, because we have different armies approaching the town of Ludlow at different times, and they all kind of come together, group up, ready for this big battle that never really happens. So tell us a little bit about why Ludlow? Why was Ludlow the place where all this went down?
Ludlow is the Yorkist headquarters on the Welsh Marches. They've got 2 major castles, which is Ludlow on one side and then Fotheringay on the other. Fotheringay was possibly a little bit too small to accommodate the size of armies that were gathering. The Yorkists have got a lot of supporters in the Welsh Marches,
right?
So it's an easy access to a large amount of people.
Well, I mean that would make sense. So it's their stronghold, as it were.
Yes.
As we talk about in the episode as well, is the Yorkists, they don't actually set up shop inside the castle. They actually, form their army up outside of the town on the other side of the river from the bridge.
Yes.
Why is that? Give us a little bit of an insight to that decision.
It seems to be a general case, with the exception of the 2 St Albans, really, that every time they set up outside of a town. What the real deep meaning is actually hard to discern, but we know all the time that in all of these battles, they're normally one side who gets there first sets up outside the town, and even in the 2nd St Albans, they set up outside the town itself. It doesn't end up like that, but so there seems to be this thing is trying not to involve the public, the ordinary people in it, because as we said right at the very start, this is a war between nobles, with very few ordinary people getting involved in it.
Yeah, we talk about that quite a lot in the first episode at St Albans, don't we? How the people of the town really are not involved in the battle itself. It's kind of all these like royal noble visitors who show up there. It doesn't really go very well for the people of Ludlow, though, because even though they're set up outside of the town, after the battle, the Lancastrians are allowed to sack the town, and which is also something that's doesn't really happen that often, does it, in the Wars of the Roses?
No, again, I think it's really against the rules of war, which doesn't help things. But in this case, the fact that it was, I suppose they're technically held out against the Lancastrians, that when they do break in, they're allowed to rape and pillage and murder and everything else, that the horrors that go with the siege.
Obviously, we've looked at Margaret, and she will stay with the series all quite a long way through. She's very much a prominent figure throughout the wars, and we know what her personality is like. And I'm pretty sure she would not have been very happy at the fact that the Yorkist rebels were allowed to kind of slip out of her grasp when she was so close to getting them.
Exactly, and that must have been one of the prime aims, was to get those Yorkist leaders and dispose of them. And this is why I think that Ludford was supposed to be the big battle that decided it all.
Yeah, but they still get the victory that they want. It's not quite a full victory, it's not quite a complete one, but they definitely get it, and it allows them to basically take away all of the Yorkist lands. Is that right?
There's an attainder against the Yorkists as a result of this, and because of it, all the Yorkist leadership loses their lands, their titles, and everything else that goes with it. So when the Yorkists return a bit later on in the year, what they do is they come back, and their first thing that they're publicly proclaiming is they want their titles back and their lands back. And again, still continuing this theme of not wanting to harm the king, just wanting to rid him of his evil counsellors. Whether that's true is another thing. Whether the Yorkists have pretensions for the throne at this point, again, is hard to say. It isn't until after Northampton that they actually make their announcement that they're going after the throne.
Mm. So then, going back a few steps to just before Ludford Bridge, you've basically got three armies closing in on the town. You've got Henry VI coming in from the east, who obviously isn't around for Blore-Heath. He's not on the scene for Blore-Heath. He's kind of a few steps behind Margaret, but he's got a big force that he's gathered, and he's marching east. And then obviously you've got Margaret's force that is putting the pressure on Salisbury and Audley up in Blore-Heath, but don't actually take part in the Battle of Blore-Heath. And then I imagine you also have some of the remnants of Audley's force that are, that were defeated at Blore-Heath, that are kind of gathered into that force behind Margaret. Would that kind of have taken place, or
yes, yeah. No, that they would have. I would assume they'd have gone back and joined the rest of the army and the main army that's forming up, ready for the big battle at Ludford.
Yeah, so you really, it's like the chess analogy we use is you've got Salisbury running away down south towards Ludlow, and you've got Margaret and her two armies effectively chasing him that way, and then you've got the king coming from the other direction as well, almost like a pincer movement trapping Yorkists in at Ludlow.
Yeah, the Yorkists were outnumbered at this point. The Yorkist party itself is still really, as you call them, the three dicks, and it isn't. But they obviously got their armies, but they seem to have had what the ace up their sleeve was the Calais garrison. The Calais garrison was the closest that England had to professional soldiers.
Yeah.
So they again were the more experienced men. They were used to fighting, and all the trappings that went with it.
So they were effectively the frontline fighting force the wars against France. So they're the cutthroats. They're the deadly weapon, and then they all decide that it's time to switch sides, taking the Yorkist plans with them. So we've got the three armies. They're marching on the town. They kind of join up, and there's talk that that's one of the biggest armies. The Lancastrian army is one of the biggest forces amassed during the period of the Wars of the Roses. It's one of the biggest ones. And then obviously you've got the Yorkists on the other side who set up outside of the town. They've got their cannons and they're firing off their cannons. Why? This might sound, this might sound silly, but why would if the cannons weren't, how effective were the cannons? And why were they kind of used in the way they were at Ludford Bridge?
The exact use is hard to say. There are only vague references to them, and how many again is actually quite vague. We don't know, but we potential from some of the sources that at least a couple of cannons were fired.
Right.
It's a bit of a tricky one, but there again, you're going to have this because of this thing and this theme where they don't want to harm the king. You're not going to publicly admit that you're firing cannons at where the king is,
right?
Because then that is committing treason. So do you see where I'm coming from? That sort of thing might be hidden in the texts, shall we say?
Yeah.
Of what was really going on. But I mean, that was even before the battle started, because the minute that the Yorkists flee, they're obviously they're in serious trouble. So that it's a key moment in the Wars of the Roses as a whole. Ludford Bridge, if the Lancastrians had won, if the Yorkists hadn't managed to escape and it had been all over, as we were saying before, this is a key moment in the whole of the Wars of the Roses, and had it gone the other way, then that would it. It would have been over. It would have been, I suppose, a footnote rebellion in a history book, as opposed to something that lasts for 37 years, and the whole thing. So this Ludford Bridge is like the staging post for what happens next, which then leads into the War of Succession.
Which is why we talk about it as a battle, even though it's a non-battle, because it's
Exactly.
the way it's the most important battle that doesn't happen. Because what we see is, we don't see at this point Richard, Duke of York, or the Yorkists, laying claim to the throne. So they're not in the same place of giving up their lives that, in that way yet. They're not at that point where they're going to fight to the death. If they can get away, they will, because there will be another opportunity. Dying in battle at Ludford Bridge would not have done their cause any service whatsoever. It would have, as you say, it had been a footnote in history. So, that decision to run away and fight another day is very much playing the long game, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, and we also mustn't forget where Henry's got one son, and the Yorkists, Richard of York, has got a whole string of sons that he can bring into the game as and when he needs to.
He'd been busy.
Yes. Yeah, so, having 4 sons
so it gives
meant
you a lot
continuity.
And Salisbury's in the same boat as well. I mean, he has a plethora of children, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. Yes. Yeah. And again, as you say, it's the same thing.
Well, I think we've covered a lot there to do with Ludford Bridge and why it's an important moment. I think a lot of people might be thinking, hold on, you're telling a story about a battle, but no one actually, there's no sword fighting, there's no cavalry charge, 1 or 2 guns go pop, but nothing really happens.
No.
Why is that a battle? And I think we've touched on that here. I think we've explained that. I think we've gone into a little bit more detail about why it was important. And as you say, it sets up the rest. It sets up what happens next.
At this point, we still haven't had the big battle. There's small battles and big skirmishes, I suppose you would call them, as in Blawheath, potentially. But we still haven't had that one big decisive battle.
The tension is building all the time, and it's a little bit like a rollover in the lottery. If no one wins the lottery one week, the next week it's even bigger.
And as you say, the tensions are rising, and the nobles are getting more agitated, but they're having more time to plan and more time to organise, which we will see when we talk about the Battle of Northampton,
which is coming next.
Yes, and that does bring it all together. Fantastic.
Well, we'll leave it there, because I think we've got a lot of stuff in there, and hopefully we've just kind of gone into a little bit more detail for those of you who want to find out a little bit more. Obviously, if you have any questions, please do leave a comment either on any of the videos, really, and Mike and I will get back to you with more information. Maybe we can give you sources to go and look at, books to read, pages to follow, all of that sort of stuff. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Thank you for watching. And Mike, once again, thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it, value it. It's amazing to have your insight. And obviously, keep sending me that research.
Thank you very much.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Thank you. Bye.